Welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead, here again to have a conversation with you about some of the stories that matter. In our second hour, the verdict is in. Former Baltimore County School Superintendent Dallas Dance was indicted on 4 counts of perjury. We will spend some time talking about the case and about the next steps. But for now, in an op-ed I wrote for the Baltimore Sun, I said that sexual assault is as American as baseball and apple pie. It is happening, and it has been happening. And in this culture of #MeToo and of telling your story and reclaiming your voice, more people are coming forward and standing in their truth. It is about empowerment. It is about realizing that the shame that you may feel if you have been abused is not your burden to bear. That belongs on the shoulders of the abusers, the ones who violate us, steal our trust, and in some cases, rob us of our childhoods. #MeToo has shifted the conversation, and according to Time magazine, it is one of the highest velocity shifts in our culture since the 1960s. I want to let you know, if you have young children in the car with you, we are in the midst of child care pickup, that we are talking about the case of Dr. Larry Nassar and what happened with the young gymnast and how we're reeling with the impact of what we heard in their cases. We want to alert you to that. A recent NPR poll found that about 70% of Americans, both men and women, believe most women have been sexually harassed at some point in their lives. Meanwhile, in the new Pew poll, a solid majority of Americans, regardless of gender, race, education, or political affiliation, said they consider the issue of sexual misconduct, sexual assault, sexual harassment to be very important for this country. We must reckon with what is happening. The road to #MeToo was possibly paved by the allegations against Bill Cosby and against the then U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump. It has since made its way through film, television, radio, publishing, music. All of those industries have been affected, and now, finally, the day of reckoning has hit the world of sports. We know about this. We saw what happened with Penn State and Larry Sandusky. We're back here again. The recent court case against former USA Gymnastics and Michigan State University Dr. Larry Nassar, in which more than 150 women and girls confronted him in court during the sentencing hearing for criminal sexual conduct. Rachel Denhollander, she was the first woman to publicly accuse Larry Nassar of sexual abuse. She was the last person to speak during the hearing. She asked in her statement, how much is a little girl worth? How much is a young woman worth? We have a clip of some of those testimonies. Let's take a listen to it.
He's going to sit in jail for the rest of his life. We, on the other hand, are going to move forward. We are going to live our best lives because we are fighters and we are strong. And we overcome impossible odds because that's what we were trained to do.
Perhaps you have figured it out by now, but little girls don't stay little forever. They grow into strong women that return to destroy your world. I was approximately 6 years old that Larry Nassar began to sexually abuse me. He first exposed his penis to me in a dark boiler room in the basement of his home. He told me, if you ever want to see it, all you have to do is ask.
I will continue to heal, and I will continue to stay strong, knowing I have a bright future ahead of me. All your future holds, all you get to look forward to now is rotting in prison for the rest of your life. And all you will ever feel now, Larry, is forever powerless.
I have been suffering from PTSD for the last 20 years. I am so incredibly angry. Angry that this happened to me, enraged that it was allowed to happen to me, furious that I've been dealing with this trauma for over 20 years and I didn't even realize it.
He took that trust and used it to molest not only myself, but over 140 young girls. It's something I still can't comprehend. I still can't think about without crying. We were just kids. We were just kids.
Michigan State University. Shame on you. I went public about my story back in January of 2016, and let me tell you, I was terrified. I was terrified because of what you would do to me.
We were just little girls. That was the cry that went out, that was heard in the courtroom as over 150 of the women who were victimized by this so-called doctor, Larry Nassar, came forward to tell their story. Some of them had their statements read in the courtroom. Some of them were surprised to be in such close proximity to this so-called doctor. During the trial, stories were heard about young girls being sexually abused while their parents were in the room. This doctor would position himself between the girl on the table and the parents wherever they were sitting, put his back towards them, and then he would proceed to sexually assault their daughter while the parent was in the room. It was painful to hear. Now, this case may be over, but as survivor Lindsay Lynch said, we're not going to heal all the way until we know exactly who knew what, when, and how they're going to fix it. Folks, we need to talk about sexual assault and sexual harassment of our children and what we are prepared to do to end this culture. We want our children to be superstars. We want them to be the next Simone Biles. We want them to be the next Michael Phelps. We want them to be the next great football player, the next Serena Williams, the next Tiger Woods. What are we willing to give up to let this happen? Are we part of the problem? It's a difficult topic to think about. I believe that in telling your story, something happens. There's a shift that takes place. And I think we should take this shift very seriously. I want to say, as we begin to open up this conversation to any woman or man, boy or girl or person of any gender, if you are brave enough to share your story, or if you have a story that you're not able to share yet, we here at Today with Dr. Kaye stand with you. If you need help, contact the National Sexual Assault Hotline. The number is 1-800-656-HOPE. 1-800-656-HOPE. Or you can give us a call here. We will get some numbers and names to you. You are not alone. So if sexual assault is indeed as American as apple pie and baseball, then it is as intrusive, as unwanted, and as debilitating as cancer. And like cancer, it needs to be cut out. It needs to be exposed. It needs to be treated with radiation and then given time to heal so that we, these fellow co-laborers in this experiment that we call life, that we can be stronger and we can be and do better by one another. So how do we end this culture and climate of rampant sexual assault against our children? Give us a call, 410-319-8888, because here on Today with Dr. Kaye, our phone lines are always open. We want to talk to you about this situation. Were you as enraged as I was when I heard it? Were you shocked to hear that there were parents who were present while their daughters were abused? Were you angry when you found out that these young girls have been coming forward since the late 90s and nobody listened to them? They followed the steps. They did what they thought was the right thing. They told their stories to their parents, to the adults present, to the other coaches, to Michigan State University officials, and nobody believed them. What might be worse is that perhaps they were believed, but in the essence of wanting to hold up the gymnastics candle, because Dr. Nassar was the gymnastics doctor for 4 teams going out of this country, wanted to hold up that candle, wanted to keep that lie alive, that they simply dismissed the stories that they heard. What do we do? How do we change this? 410-319-8888. We have been talking about this case, and we've been thinking about this case. This doctor, Larry Nassar, he was a household name in the gymnastics community. He was a star in sports medicine. He was a sought-after physician at Michigan State University. Some of what he was doing seems completely unorthodox to me. I mean, it was illegal, but completely unorthodox, where he would do all types of things with the young girls, from touching the top part of their body to touching below the waist, all in the name of, I'm trying to make you feel better. This is what I do to help you. He had the young girls on the table questioning themselves. Many of the young victims said, I thought something was wrong with me, because who am I to hate the man that everybody loves? They said he was charming. He put you at ease. He would talk to you about sports and the weather while he was sexually assaulting you. This is a man who was married. He had 3 kids, 3 girls. And yet, he was a monster. He was a predator. And there are people who knew it and allowed it to continue. 410-319-8888. What do you think of this case? How did it strike you? We have a clip from Cameron Moore, and her testimony particularly resonated with us. Let's take a quick listen to it.
Initially, I wasn't going to come here and say anything to you. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't want this child I'm carrying to be in the same room as a child molester. Even an unborn life shouldn't be subjected to that. That's how deeply I hate you for what you did to me. You molested a little girl who had just lost her father. I want to thank my mom right now for raising me to know that even as a little girl, I had the power to say no to a grown man. I doubt she ever thought I'd have to use that power against someone she considered a friend. She did consider you a friend. She trusted you, and now she feels like she's failed me as a mother because she couldn't see what a psychopath you are. Her and I both have to live with that every day. When I found out what you had really been doing to me, I understood so many things about why I am the way I am now. Why I hate when anyone touches me unless I initiate it, even my own boyfriend at the time. Almost every friend I've ever had has told me that they don't understand me. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there for my teammates. But I was there for one person, and I had to watch them process their confusion. My own brother. Imagine that. My whole family was fooled by you, but I know now who you really are. A child molester and a master manipulator, and I don't blame myself anymore for being the innocent child that I was. You will never mean anything to anyone for the rest of your entire life.
This man, Dr. Larry Nassar, he treated top athletes, Kerry Strug, Simone Biles, Allie Raceman, Jordan Weber. He had a stellar reputation for sports injury prevention and athlete rehab. So if your daughter played softball, played volleyball, she was a gymnast, and she was injured, you would take them to Dr. Larry Nassar. You would take them right in there so that he can treat them and hopefully help them to get back up. This man, who was known for having a warm and disarming manner, he put shy teenagers at ease, and I'm getting my information from the BBC report. He's a monster. He's a predator. He pleaded guilty in November to 10 counts of first-degree criminal sexual conduct, with 7 of them happening in Ingham County and 3 in Eaton County. The low end of his sentence, people thought it would be between 25 to 40 years. The judge was not having that. Now, please understand that this for him was the second trial that he was in the midst of. The first trial, and in this one he had received 60 years in prison, was for federal child pornography charges. Listen to this, folks. When they went and pulled this man's computer, they found more than 37,000 images and videos of child pornography, some of them featuring girls as young as 6 years old. They were seized from his home. So it wasn't just on his computer. That's where the bulk of them were. He also had videos. This man has a wife and children. Did no one see anything wrong? Did no one suspect anything in his own home? He was running for office in his local town. There was a GoPro. That's a video that was made. It was of him allegedly molesting girls in a pool. So there was hardcore evidence, which is why he received 60 years in prison for that. I have a clip from the judge on the case of the sexual assault. Let's take a listen to what she said.
Wrong and bad. They feel I broke their trust. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Oh. It is just a complete nightmare. The stories that are being fabricated to sensationalize this. Then the AG would only accept my plea if I said what I did was not medical and was for my own pleasure. They forced me to say that, or they were going to trial and not accepting the plea. I wanted to plead no contest, but the AG refused that. I was so manipulated by the AG and now Aquilina, and all I wanted was to minimize stress to everyone, like I wrote earlier. And with the federal case, my medical treatments with the Olympic/National Team Gymnastics were discussed as part of the plea. The FBI investigated them in 2015 and found nothing substantial because it was medical. Now they are seeking the media attention and financial reward. Would you like to withdraw your plea?
No, Your Honor.
Because you are guilty, aren't you? Are you guilty, sir?
I said my plea, exactly.
That was Judge Rosemarie Aquilina. That was in Lansing, Michigan. She was reading Larry Nassar's statement. He actually had the audacity to write that he did not want to sit in the courtroom and listen to gymnast after gymnast. And he said, and I quote, that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Folks, this man abused 6-year-old girls. Those are not women. Those are little girls. He abused 7-year-old babies. Those are not women. Those are little girls. These little girls grew up and they stood in their power. I like what one of the women said. Little girls don't stay little girls forever. They become women and they come back to be your nightmare. So this man who has up for this judge, Judge Aquilina gave him up to 175 years. And on top of that, he's going to start off serving 60 years for child pornography. Folks, I'm going to tell you, I don't even think that's enough. I don't think that's enough when we start talking about the impact of the damage that is done when someone is sexually assaulted. Let me give the number to the National Sexual Assault Hotline, and then I want to take your calls. 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-HOPE. Or give us a call. 410-319-8888, and we will make sure to get some names and numbers into your hands. If you have been a victim of sexual assault, you are not alone. We have Alexander on our show. Alexander, welcome to Today with Dr. Kaye. Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. How are you, sir?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thanks
Fine.
a lot for taking my call.
Thank you for calling.
Yeah, so this whole conversation around the sexual assault really pandemic is very troubling, and you know, the whole story which you've been talking about is just really what sort of gets to me is I really do find it hard to believe that the parents of over 150 children didn't know. I really do believe when I have to say, when I was a child and when I was at the doctor's, my mother was standing next to the doctor with every single thing that the doctor did, constantly asking questions, was all up in it. So I just, I think that, yes, this man was a monster. I don't disagree with that. But I really do believe that an investigation needs to be launched into many of these parents, because I do believe that they not only knew that this was going on, but just allowed it to allowed it to be going on. I mean, to me, it's just complete. I'm not a parent, but judging from the way I was parented and understanding how my grandparents parented my parents, they would never allow a 6-year-old to be in anyone's house unsupervised. That's crazy to me.
Now, Alexander, I just want to say, I want to respond to that because I'm the same way. I have kids, Alexander. I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, 2 boys. And I know when I would take them to the doctors, I was not standing by the door. I was not standing at the doctor's back. I was standing right by my child so I can see exactly what the doctor's doing. And I was constantly asking my sons, are you okay? Does this make you feel uncomfortable? Because, you're poking and prodding, because I didn't want to find out later that something happened under my watch. So I know what you mean.
Right. And the thing is, the reason why I suggest that an investigation needs to be launched with the parents, because a lot of the times with famous folk and with Hollywood, now this is I'm going to sound crazy to a lot of folks here, but there's actually a lot of child sacrifices that go on.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there are, and they are actually very much are sexual. And that actually ranges across all age ranges. When we look at Donald Trump, when we look at Bill Cosby, when we look at I forget the guy in Hollywood, a lot of these
Harvey Weinstein.
Yes. A lot of the women who are in these realms are told that they have to do something 9 times out of 10 in order to achieve some sort of status that they want. Now, all of this is inherent in just deeply rooted patriarchy in our society, and just really have roots in just sort of the romantic norms between men and women. Just men are seen, even in healthy relationships, as the aggressors, quote unquote. Women are told, well, you can't be really straightforward with what you're trying to say. You have to drop hints here and there, yada, 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 yada. You have a lot of people out here who are warped in the mind, who misinterpret said signals, and because they were raised a certain way, a.k.a. boys will be boys, they feel that they have carte blanche, they have access to do what they want.
These kind of things. Well, I'm going to stop you there. I'm going to stop you there, Alexander. I'm going to ask you to hold on over the break. So I want to have you finish your point because you're getting into kind of the deeper level here. So if you can hold on, we will come back. Folks, this is Today with Dr. Kaye. We're going to leave it here for just a moment. We're talking about sexual assault, and I want to give you the National Sexual Assault Hotline number once more, 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-HOPE. This is Today with Dr. Kaye. Stay with us. Welcome back to Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Wise Whitehead. 156 young women, mothers, sisters, daughters, Olympians, all say they were abused by the same man, former Team USA gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar. It took 7 days, and one by one, they got up to do something that some people rarely get a chance to do. They confronted their attacker. Many of these young women said they were abused, and their parents were in the room. I just want to begin this conversation again by giving you the phone number to the National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-HOPE. If you or someone you've been victimized, if this conversation is triggering something for you, give them a call or call us, and we will get numbers and names to you at 410-319-8888. We were talking to Alexander. Alexander, I want to give you a chance to finish up, sir.
Yeah, well, you don't want me to finish up because we'll actually be here all day.
Okay, well, let me have you wrap up in the next 30 seconds or so. I didn't want you to go without saying your last sentence. You were talking about the fact that when we start talking about the ways in which we're training young boys, we're dealing with this hyper testosterone-driven culture where boys will be boys in terms of feeling that they can take whatever they want from girls.
Yeah, and not only that, too, but a lot of that's a problem with the way boys are trained, but the way that girls are trained, too, girls are trained that they have to react based on what the boy is doing rather than be resolute in their own selves.
Some girls, right? Some girls.
Well, the thing is, when we look at rape cases, right, most of them are committed, like date rapes are committed by folks that 9 times out of 10 that they know.
Right, that's the date rape
Sexual
definition.
assault, things of that nature. Like, it's just, how do I say this? It's just the whole, it's just sort of the whole idea, whereas is that the man has to decide the trajectory of a romantic relationship. You know what I'm saying? And
I know what you're saying.
That's very problematic.
It
in
is.
a lot of ways.
It is. Now, I'm going to stop you there, Alexander. Thank you for finishing up. Folks, Alexander has put a number of things onto the table, and I want to hear you respond to it. One, he's talking about how we may need to investigate the parents. He talked about his own upbringing, how his mother was always with the doctor, because some of these young girls who were sexually assaulted by Dr. Larry Nassar, the parents were in the room. I have Sarita on the line. Sarita, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
Hello. And Sarita, I know that you're a new caller.
I'm a new caller.
And I just want to ring my bell and say welcome to the family, Sarita.
Thank you so much. I was riding down the road, and when I heard Mr. Alexander, I literally had to pull over because I'm furious, and smoke is probably coming out of my head right now. I am a mother of a gymnast. My daughter's been doing gymnastics ever since she was about 5 years old. She would be level 9. However, I'm just furious because to even accuse these parents, these girls have gymnastics sometimes 30 hours a week. And so you're constantly with your coaches. They become family. They become family. And so are you sitting with your daughter when she goes to visit an aunt or an uncle? Are you monitoring everything that they're doing? So it's the same concept because this doctor was probably like family. And this is probably the reason why people don't come forward because of comments like that. Like, how dare this man even accuse parents of being negligent? When you're in the room with your doctor and you've been going to this doctor for many, many years, and this is the same person that you've called late at night and have taken emergency visits with, who would have thought that this man would do something like that? The doctor is a sick individual, but that has no reflection of these parents and who they are. And I'm appalled that he would even go there and even accuse or parents of being negligent. How dare he?
Now, I wanted to just ask you, Sarita, thank you so much for calling and refuting that, particularly because you are the mother of a gymnast. I wanted to ask you, when your daughter goes for her regular, I guess these are regular checkups at gyms. I don't have any daughters. I don't know. You can talk me through it. But do they have these regular physical body checkups as part of the process? Is it just when they get hurt? Like, do you work with a doctor who checks her out before she actually competes?
In my experience, we have a doctor who is a doctor for the gymnast.
Okay.
He's somebody that is very known at the gym, very connected to the girls. You know, she may come into the gym so many times a week if there's something wrong with one of the girls, or if there's an emergency or something happens, you know, we rush the girls over to this doctor. But this doctor has a relationship with the parents, with the girls, and so we know her, we love her, we trust her. And so, you know, would we just, you know, oh, we've got to go in, you know, while she's seeing the doctor today? Or, I mean, like this happened. Some of the parents were right there in the room. I mean, it's rude and intrusive that if your daughter is being examined, and these girls also, you know, I don't know about the younger ones, but older girls, they're going through puberty, and they don't want their moms looking over them while they're being examined and things of that nature.
Now, let me ask you one more thing, Sarita. When you heard about this case, can you tell me what you thought? How did it impact you, particularly as a mother of a gymnast?
It was very hard to hear, and it was very sad to hear, you know, what those girls are saying. And, you know, I did have a conversation with my daughter, like, wow, how does this make you feel? And what are your thoughts about this? So yes, it is. It's awful. It's horrible. And it has nothing to do with boys will be boys, because I don't think that's the motto, and that's not the way that we should teach. I mean, people are going to be people, whether it's a boy, a girl, a woman, a man. I mean, sick people are sick, and that's the bottom line.
Thank you so much, Sarita. Thanks for joining the family and for chiming in. Folks,
Thank you.
Thank you. We're talking about this case around sexual assault. These young girls, over 150 young girls were abused by this doctor sometimes with their parents in the room. This is what's happening now. Give me a call, 410-319-8888. Join the conversation. Evelyn, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you very much.
And I'm told that you're a new caller, Evelyn?
Yes, I am.
So welcome to the family.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. So what do you think, Evelyn?
Well, I just listened to the lady before me being so upset because of people saying that the parents should be investigated. I don't have girls. I have two boys. My granddaughters, I have two of them, two girls. Now, if you're in the room with a doctor and he's sexually touching, molesting, whatever he's doing to your children, and you're right there, when you leave there with your child and your child looks a little weird,
right.
I want to know what's wrong with you before we get into that car. Because I may have to go back into that office and say a few words.
Right.
Or do something else, because that's my child. But, when I was listening to you talk about this, and the first thought came to my mind is, where's her name, Morena Bobbitt?
Yes.
Where is she?
Yeah.
Yeah, she need to, people need to.
Things need to happen where people have to be held accountable. I want to throw something out for you, Evelyn, because what he would do is he would lay the girls onto whatever this bed is, and he would do the examinations. He would put a towel over them. And while he's massaging their stomach, he would put his hand underneath the towel and then, of course, touch the lower part of their body where they did not have any clothes on. And so in the presence of the parents, so they may be at his back, and then he would tell the young girl, I'm closing my eyes so I could focus.
See, this is what my mind is thinking. You're in the room, I'm in the room as a parent, and then he's got a towel. What's the towel for?
Right.
Why is she covered? She's supposed to have one of those little cutesy outfits.
Anyway, right?
Why you need to be massaging below the stomach. And again, once the child is out of there, and you look at your baby and then she looks a little weird, because you teach your children, if anybody touches your, whatever little name they have for it,
right,
especially 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Right, whatever you're calling it, right?
Whatever the little name you have for it, you need to say, well, he touched my...
Yep, and be clear.
Right. And like I said, that's when I need to know if I need to go back in there or not.
Do a Lorena Bobbitt.
I'm not going back in there the way I came out, believe me.
Yep. Thank you so much, Evelyn, for checking in.
Thank
Folks,
you.
Are you talking to your child about this? I know we made a decision, my husband and I, in our household. We didn't use cutesy names. We call the body parts what they were called. We did not want our sons to be confused that if someone touched this body part, this is what it is. No made-up names. This is the actual name for that body part, and nobody is supposed to touch it. Nobody. Teaching them that early, and if somebody does, don't worry. You have advocates in your corner. Trusted, beloved doctor, trusted, beloved uncle, trusted, beloved deacon, trusted, beloved pastor, or not. Nobody is supposed to touch your private parts of your body. I have Bubby on the line. Bubby, welcome back to the show.
How you doing?
How you doing, sir?
I got a couple of points, man. I had took my girlfriend. I think all women should see a female gynecologist.
Yeah.
Because my lady friend, I've been brought it up to her, but then when her daughter said she wasn't comfortable with the doctor that she had since they were soever, I said, I don't think that's right and appropriate, because should no woman feel comfortable with jumping up on the table for any man to examine them?
Right. I agree, actually.
So then with the lady, with these people who want to live their life through their children,
right,
that they will cover up everything just to be an Olympic hopeful.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that that's the case in it, because this man did some sick stuff.
Right, he did.
But the bottom line is some people would look to the blind thing just to get a gold medal.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
It's not appropriate, but I think we should all look at it more than just Dr. Levy and a whole bunch of other people. Why you can't get a female gynecologist or somebody who know the body better than a man?
Yeah, I mean, I need to try to. I agree with you. I'm going to say very clearly, Bubby, I do. I mean, I have a female gynecologist really for that reason alone. Now, this is not to say, folks, don't call me screaming. I am not saying that women don't also sexually assault other women and boys. I am not saying that. I'm just recognizing the point that Bubby just made. So, Bubby, thank you so much for calling in. Folks, you want to get in this conversation. 410-319-8888. 156 young women accused one doctor of molesting them over years. Some of them, he started molesting them at the age of 6. According to the victims, in their words, he groomed us. He helped us. He nurtured us and kept us as his victims. We have Rashid on the line. Rashid, welcome to the show.
No, thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely.
That last number you gave out was incredible. You know what? That just speaks to privilege right there.
Yeah.
I thought that the number was honestly 106. I was like, I'm actually surprised at that. But no, so my actual comment was because, this is a real big problem, I feel like just in the greater just society in the country as well, because, I'm 30 years old this year, and I don't think I think all of except for like 4 women that I've ever been with, I think that every one of them has told me that they were, that something bad happened to them when they were younger.
Yes, that is
whether
true.
they were molested or something like that. And, so I try to step up and, and speak up as much as possible in these types of situations as much as possible, especially for, like a younger man to speak up, because a lot of the times, you don't want to drown out the women that are around you's voice, but you also want to give support and help. But I don't, I remember growing up and all throughout my life, I always used to say, what's going to happen to me? I'm a little black boy, like
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
never
No,
out
you're
to
right.
and as an adult, I just think to myself, like, how privileged I was to be able to say that.
Right.
From the ages of 8 to 30, I've never thought to myself, someone's just looking out to snatch me and do stuff like that. And I just think wow, it just speaks to the strength of women to be able to step out and do things to to get justice for themselves after so many years. But that was my comment.
Thank you so much, Rashid, for calling in. Folks, the women came forward. And let's be clear, when they came forward now, many of them have been coming forward for years and nobody believed them. There are stories where some of the victims told their parents. The parents laughed at them and then had them apologize to Dr. Nasser. Folks, this is something that we have to kind of dig into. I have John on the line. John, welcome to the show.
Put you in the last 10 minutes, and I heard someone attack a caller who said something about the parents, and you just hit it. Some of those girls told their parents.
Yes.
There was one father who committed suicide
Because of
after,
it. Yep.
And it's another thing. It's that belief factor. I've told you that I do a lot of work in West Baltimore.
Right.
And a lot of the girls came to me and told me about being incest is a big problem, about their own father, and about being passed on by other family members. And a lot of times they don't share that story with people because they don't think people will believe them. And the parents, some of those parents, they were aware. And the young man who called before was talking about they saw their daughter, receiving a gold medal or a bronze medal.
Yeah.
Not that the gentleman, I don't think he was attacking all parents.
Right.
But he was saying that you need to be vigilant and you need to have a relationship with your child that they can come and share with you those kinds of things.
I completely agree, John.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Yes. So, folks, when this situation happens, are you keeping the lines of communication open with your children? I want to give the number to the National Sexual Assault Hotline before we change topics here. 1-800-656-HOPE. That's 1-800-656-HOPE. So when we continue to delve into this, if you understand the depth of what has happened, you should be as disgusted and as concerned as we are. You can either give them a call or you can call us, 410-319-8888. We will get names and numbers into your hand. We have Rhonda on the line. Rhonda, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you.
Hold on, Rhonda. I was told you're a new caller?
Yes, I am.
I do want to ring the bell and just say welcome to the family, Rhonda. Thank you for calling.
Oh, thank you for having me. this is really disturbing because this is not something new. It's been going on for years and years. And I, too, have experienced, but thank God I was equipped and armed to tell the enemy to get back in Iran, and I fled from that thing. But
wait a minute, I'm a little confused. Did this happen to you when you were in Iran?
No, this happened to me. Wait a minute, what subject are we on? I thought we were discussing about the 150 young
No, I
ladies.
thought so too. I thought you said you were victimized in Iran. I didn't understand you.
No, I said that as a young female, I too almost became a victim of trying to be molested by. But the difference is this was females who tried it with me.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so we can't get off course with just men because it's women who do it too. And I want to make that clear that if it's not a man, it can also be a woman that tried it too. So arm your children, males and females, to be watchful as well as prayerful for predators who are females just as well.
And so in talking to children, Rhonda, before you go, are there any tips in terms of keeping the lines of communication open? Is it just probing them? Is it checking in with them? What do you suggest, Rhonda?
Well, letting your children know to trust their gut instinct.
Okay.
When something arises and something don't sound right, and you have to continue talking to your children, not only the parents, but this is why it's important for us not to just throw out the elders in the family, hear what they have to say, and parents listen to the elders, because a lot of times the parents don't want to listen to their parents, and the parents end up going through this, and then they go to their parents. But we need our elders in the community to come forward, and we need, as a parent, I listen to my elders in my family and in the community, because that's the way it works. And when you arm your children with listening to those who they know are sound in their decision making, then when they're out there, they can say no and then come tell someone. And that's what happened with me. I was able to flee because it was 2 incidents in my gym, and I was a cheerleader. And, people watch you, and
they do.
And you just don't know who's who. But in my instance, it was females who tried to come at me as a young girl. And I ran, thank God, and I told the family members.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. And thank you for just kind of joining the phones here and letting us know your story. Folks, I just want to let you know, if this is you, if this has happened to you, or if it's happening to you, you are not alone. The National Sexual Assault Hotline number is 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-HOPE. So we have to kind of think about all of these things, and we have to get ourselves together. We have to be vigilant as much as possible, because it is important for us to deal with these issues. So we're going to leave this conversation here for just a moment. This is not the last time we're going to pick it up. We're going to continue to follow this. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to the recent indictment of Baltimore City Police Detective Richard Pinero, Jr. Even though we're moving on with topics, my producer is standing by to take your phone calls and make sure you have the numbers that you need. This is Today with Dr. Kaye. Stay with us. We now turn our attention to the recent indictment of Officer Richard A. Pinero, Jr. He was indicted by the Baltimore City Grand Jury on Tuesday. He was indicted on the following charges: tampering with or fabricating physical evidence, common law misconduct in office. Joining us now to kind of help us to understand that is former federal prosecutor and legal analyst Cheryl Wood. How are you, Ms. Wood?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Dr. Kaye.
Thank you for joining us. So I just wanted to ask you to kind of break down exactly what happened with Richard Pinero. And then, of course, we're going to take a quick, top of the hour break. When we come back, we're going to continue the conversation. But we want to get it started now. So what exactly happened in this case?
Well, what happened was back last July of 2017, there were a few tapes from officers now wearing these body cameras that were controversial, where either the officer turned it on after the incident or the officers were apparently unaware that even if you turn it on, it still records the 30 seconds before you turned it on. So it's always operating. So this case is about that incident. And in fact, this tape that he's charged with was made public last July. So we've known about it for quite some time, but the charges are now coming. So he's charged with fabricating evidence. He is charged with taking a can and putting it in a field and then turning the camera on and coming back to that field and saying, hey, look what I found. But the camera had already shown that he had put it there and then come back and said, hey, look what I found. So that's the thing. The police department, our former Commissioner Davis, was supportive of the officer and said he was just recreating what he had found to put it on tape because he knew his tape wasn't on when he first, put it there or found it there. So he was recreating the scene, if you will. And that was the explanation for quite a few tapes. But so for this one, they've charged fabricating evidence for this. It's a misdemeanor, and it carries a maximum penalty of 3 years and a $5,000 fine. And then he's also charged with misconduct in office, which is a common law offense, so it's not statutory. But in order for them to find him guilty of misconduct in office, they'd have to find him guilty of the fabricating evidence charge. So that's the main charge.
Now, let me ask you, Cheryl, so it's like we've been dealing with these body cameras for a while. I'm thinking about, the way in which we've moved forward with Black Lives Matter and this idea that we're trying to hold the police accountable. In cases like this, there's a part of me that feels a little uncomfortable because we have the body cameras in place, but police officers are, in my opinion, taking advantage of the fact that they can turn them on and off. So
Absolutely.
How can we trust any of the evidence at this point?
Well, it's controversial, and I think after this happened, the Baltimore City Police Department, they revised their policy again and said that you have to start recording at the initiation of a call for service or any other activity or any encounter that's investigative or enforcement related. Now, sometimes civilians may request that they don't want to be recorded, and it just depends on where they are. I mean, obviously, if they're out on a public street, they don't really have a right to not be recorded. But let's say an officer's in their home and they don't want the recording, there are circumstances where it might not be on. It can't be on all the time because officers may, they want to have a private conversation with their spouse. They want to go to the bathroom, whatever they're doing. So it wouldn't be on all the time. There has to be a way to turn it on and off. And yes, that's a problem. But this whole 30-second sort of reverse that it shows the previous 30 seconds before you turned it on is a very useful feature, as is the case with these charges.
I think what's interesting, Cheryl, and I want to ask you this before we go to break, that even in instances in the past where we've had video, I'm thinking, of Eric Garner, I'm thinking of Tamir Rice, I'm thinking of Philando Castile, when we had video and the police officers still were not indicted. So how reliable is the footage when it's not able to bring about the kind of justice that people are seeking in these cases?
Well, absolutely. As we know, we started off with dash cam cameras.
Right.
That was supposed to be the answer, and that was supposed to show. And then we've moved on and now have the body cam, and it's not perfect. And people have different interpretations of what they see based upon various things, including their own biases. And
now, Cheryl, I'm going to have you stop right there. I'm sorry. We're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, folks, I'm pulling you into this conversation. We're talking about body cams. We're talking about the indictment of Richard Pinero Jr. This is Today with Dr. Kaye. Stay tuned for an update from MTA.
Good afternoon from the MTA. Out there right now, you'll find Metro Subway Link operating with a 5 to 10 minute delay. Perhaps allow a little extra time in your travels there. Light Rail Link, A-OK for the commute start. No delays in either direction of that line. You'll find the MARC train system on time on the Camden, Penn, and Brunswick lines of MARC. And out there on the buses, no major delays, but you will encounter a few diversions, including the 62 northbound. It's diverted to Avondale and William Wade for a water main break repair. The 62 southbound at Dundalk and Maine. The Navy line eastbound at Maine and Avon Beach, and also the green and purple lines eastbound at Baltimore and Calhoun for ongoing construction there. For the MTA Transit team, I'm Mark Jones on 88.9 FM, WEAA, the voice of the community.
Welcome back to Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Whitehead. We began the show today talking about what's been happening in Michigan with the 156 women who came forward to stand in their power and talk about what happened when they were abused by Olympic gymnast Dr. Larry Nassar. We've been giving out the number to the National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656 HOPE. That's 1-800-656-HOPE. I want to make sure, folks, that if you are someone who's been the victim of sexual assault, if it's happening to you now, if this story has triggered something, you are not alone. There's a place that you can call. There are people that are there to support you. You can also give us a call, and we will make sure names and numbers are put into your hand. 410-319-8888. We now turn our attention back to talking about the Baltimore City police officer, Richard Pinero Jr., who was, at this point, we're very excited to find out that he's being held accountable. He was indicted by a Baltimore City grand jury on Tuesday for tampering with or fabricating physical evidence, common law misconduct, dealing with these body cameras. I'm joined by Cheryl Wood, former federal prosecutor and legal analyst. Cheryl, thank you for staying with us.
Oh, happy to be here.
So before we went to break, we were talking about how can we even trust any information, that in cases like Eric Gardner and Tamir Rice, Philando Castile, those are particular cases where there was video, and yet the officers were not indicted. So what do we do in cases like this when the video is not working out to give people the justice that they're seeking?
Well, and so those cases, as I was saying, I think it's interesting that people see the videos differently. They bring their own biases, even though it's on video. I mean, we knew from a very long time ago, and my memory's escaping me, but you can help me out. Back in L.A., who was?
Oh yeah, that's Rodney King.
Right,
yes.
That was on tape somehow
right.
way back then, and still, people looked at it differently. So we've been dealing with that issue for a very long time. I think. It's growing pains here in Baltimore with regards to the body cameras because, I mean, it can hurt or help the police, quite frankly, right? And so it could help exonerate them in situations where they have done the right thing, and it could show them doing the wrong thing. And so it's going to be interesting how it shakes out. This particular case, did not involve, fortunately, anyone's death or anything like that. I think that the fabricating evidence charge is still going to be difficult to prove because I don't think this is the normal way where we would think of fabricating evidence. We would normally think of someone creating something, or something like that, and it doesn't necessarily. And I don't know. We have to hear all the facts, but it doesn't necessarily sound like that's what happened here, or that's what's shown on the video here. It's showing him putting it somewhere and then saying, hey, I found it, and he's going to give his explanation for that. But it doesn't show him fabricating it, from somewhere else or taking it from one place to another, much like the allegations that we're hearing right now in the trial that's going on in Baltimore City regarding the gun trace task force trial.
Right.
And that trial is talking about them actually fabricating evidence and going after people just because in order to steal from them. And I mean, the trial is like various episodes of The Wire that's playing out right now in our city. And so this case, though, may not amount to all of that. And I think actually it might be hard for them to prove fabricating evidence.
See, that's something that's a little bit disappointing. With the Rodney King case that happened in 1991, if folks are not familiar with it, there was video that showed Rodney King being pulled from his car and being beaten by the cops. That video then went. There was a case. The cops were found not guilty, and there was the argument, well, you didn't see what happened before you saw that one little clip that became very famous. This is years, Cheryl, before we even had the internet. They were playing it on the news. And that's how everyone saw it. So that's just giving us people a little update. One of the things that gets me, Cheryl, is I was looking at Sean King, and he's a columnist for The Intercept, looking at his Twitter page. And he tweeted out just earlier this week that so far this year, it's only January 25th, 83 people have already been killed by police officers in this country. And it's only January 25th. In cases like this, what are some of the rights that family members have if they have a family member who has been killed by police or even victimized by police?
Well, they definitely have a right to bring obviously to participate and be as helpful as they can. And if there are criminal charges, for example, but of course there may not be, but they have a right to a civil suit and to bring a civil suit against the city that it happened in, against that officer in that police department, and to bring a suit for wrongful death or for, if someone's injured, for their injuries. So that person would have to bring the charges, obviously, if they're still alive. But if they have been killed, they do have a right to bring a civil suit. And there are lots of attorneys who will take those cases on contingency, where they only get paid if you get paid. And there's trials like that happening all the time. In fact, the trial is starting next week of the young woman in Baltimore County. When the police came into her apartment, and came into her apartment, and she was shot, and her little boy was
was
shot,
in the room with her.
well.
Yes, her little boy.
So,
I think he was injured, but he did survive.
Right, he did survive, and she was killed, and then her boyfriend or the child's father had already left the apartment, so he probably is actually one of the parties to the lawsuit as well. So that trial is starting next week in Baltimore County. So you do have rights as a family, and you need to reach out to the attorneys whose names you know, or get referrals from friends and see what you can pursue.
And it's difficult. Why is it? If you could just kind of just make it clear to us, and I just want to be just know it was Corinne Gaines, and there was a standoff with the police officer. They were coming to serve a warrant to her house. She had a weapon in the home. She would not come out. She told them there are a number of ways they could have dealt with this situation. They could have brought in hostage negotiations. They could have done so many things rather than shooting and killing her inside of her house. So in dealing with going forward with this and trying to figure out how to understand this system, one of the questions that I get a lot, and folks should invite to give us a call, 410-319-8888, is why is it so difficult to get police officers indicted and found guilty in this country when it comes to police brutality?
Well, I will tell you, I've thought about this for many, many years, and I think when people, society, and citizens in society were always willing to give the police the benefit of the doubt because of the nature of their job. And unfortunately, the police and their role, because of all the corruption, which is not everybody, but because of the corruption, that viewpoint and sort of the community, the police community relations has been really damaged because of the police-involved shootings. And so now some people aren't willing, obviously, to give them the benefit of the doubt. But for years, they did. And even now, we can't. A lot of times the charges won't be brought. It depends on who the prosecutor is in that particular jurisdiction and how they handle presenting that case or not to a grand jury, and how they handle it. It's often going to come out the way the prosecutor might want it to come out. Charges will not come out, but charges will be brought based upon whether that prosecutor wants to bring charges or not. That individual, and with all of that individual's biases and that sort of thing. So that's one problem. You're dealing with these often elected officials, and so it's very important to look at who you're electing for your local prosecutor because they have a lot of power. with regards to discretion about whether they're going to bring charges or not. And so that's one factor. Another factor is if an officer is acting within their duties, in other words, they're on duty, they're pursuing someone or engaging in a car stop or whatever they're doing, and they end up in a police-involved shooting of a citizen, as long as they were on duty and carrying out their duties, citizens are often willing to give them a pass. Now, if they're doing something totally outlandish outside of their duties and blatantly, but if they're shooting, that's not going to be enough a lot of times. If they shoot and they say I was in fear or I saw a flash of something, that's all they need to say.
Now, folks, we want to invite you to join our conversation, 410-319-8888. This is Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm talking to former federal prosecutor and legal analyst Cheryl Wood. Cheryl, I have a question before we talk about Dallas Dance, one that I have just been wrestling with. Now that the dust has settled, around what happened with Freddie Gray, and it seems like no one is going to go to jail in that particular instance, I'm still unclear why one cop, even the van driver, wasn't found guilty and sent to jail. Is that one of those particular situations where it's just not enough proof? It's just too hard to go down that road? Was it Freddie Gray's background? Like, how did we end up in this place where nobody's being held accountable?
Well, I don't think it was necessarily Freddie Gray's background. I do think that it is difficult to prosecute police officers. I do think that the particular charges that they were charged with, I think, were difficult to prove against them because of the way the situation, carried itself out. For it to be criminal, now for it to be civil negligence and that sort of thing, I think, then the city settled with the family.
Right.
That's another example of a civil settlement. Criminally, it was before Judge Barry Williams, who I respect, and who has experience prosecuting police officers himself on a federal level, and I knew him from my days in the Department of Justice, and I think that it was difficult for them to prove the elements of that crime, just the way the crime is written and what the elements are, and for the prosecutors to bring proof of each of those elements. It was just very difficult for them to prove it, and that's what it came down to. And a lot of people disagree with that, and I understand that, and they think that, someone should have been found guilty. But you're right, no one is going to go to jail criminally. And I was surprised that the civil trial boards or civilian trial boards came out the way they did, and still no one was held accountable, and that wasn't a criminal setting, and obviously doesn't have as high a burden of proof as proof beyond a reasonable doubt, like in a criminal case. But a lot of people disagree over this. I think we'll disagree over it for many years.
Forever, right?
I sat in the trial for many days, witnessing it for myself to see, and it was just difficult for the prosecutors to meet their burden in those cases.
And I think a lot of people, myself included, if you don't completely understand the law, or if your own understanding of the law is based upon, say, Law and Order SVU, that's the extent you have. I mean, it is hard to follow, and it's hard to make sense of it because you saw the video of Freddie Gray and you're expecting guilty, and that doesn't always happen. I want to switch a little bit, Cheryl, in the last little time I have left with you, to talk about the former Baltimore County School Superintendent, Dallas Dance, being indicted on 4 counts of perjury. Can you explain to us what happened here and how we were able to get to this point?
Well, we've been coming to this point for a while with Dr. Dance. He resigned back in April of 2017, and he gave his personal reasons, but it became clear soon after that he was being investigated by the state prosecutor. So the state prosecutor, prosecutor, I don't know, Davitt. So that's different than the local prosecutors that we have for the various counties for the whole entire state. And so he's the one, for example, who brought charges against Sheila Dixon. And so he often also brings charges in cases involving political issues.
So it goes to the state level for that.
Right. So this is the state prosecutor for the entire state, so it's a different office. And so really these things that Dallas Dance is being charged with is 4-count indictment for his financial disclosure forms from 2012, 2013, 2015, and his amended form in 2015. They're saying that by signing those forms and not including all this money that he was making from other outside entities that he was consulting with, that by not including that information and signing that form under penalty of perjury, that he's charged with these 4 counts of perjury, up to 10 years, you could get on each count. Obviously, I don't believe he would get that if he were convicted, but up to 10 years on each count. And so, whenever, you guys, whenever you're signing these forms that say under penalty of perjury, pay attention. Certainly Dallas has had, Dr. Dance had a lot of notice that this was a problem. The school board before he had an ethics complaint against him for having these outside jobs and consulting. He was consulting with Supes Academy, which brought down the superintendent of Chicago and sent her to jail. So there was a lot of, sort of preview that he had that this is a problem. But even after the school board sort of took whatever action they did, which, people are talking about now, whether they took enough action against him back then, his contract was renewed and he kept going. Now, his contract was renewed in 2016 and he left April 2017. So that being so abrupt as a 4-year contract, we all kind of knew that something was happening.
Now, folks, if you're just joining us, this is Today with Dr. Kaye. We're talking to Cheryl Wood, former federal prosecutor and legal analyst. If you have a question for Ms. Wood, you have a question that needs a legal response, you can give us a call, 410-319-8888. Cheryl, now, when I look at the amount of money that he failed to disclose, $147,000, it actually doesn't seem like that much for what has happened to him. Is there some type of message being sent? Is there a statement behind this? Because it doesn't seem like a lot of money for him to potentially go to jail for up to, 40 years?
Well, yeah, and like I said, that won't happen, but certainly that's just the maximum penalty. But, I mean, realize if you go back and look at, for example, Sheila Dixon's case, I think it was less than $1,000.
Yeah, it wasn't that much at all.
I don't even remember, $1,500, whatever it was.
Yeah. For the little card, right, the gift cards.
Yeah, it was very small, and maybe gift cards or maybe Xbox or something. Right. It was a very small amount of money. But for that particular office, that's not the issue. Corruption is the issue.
Okay.
Corruption in a public office, and so they don't seem to care if it's $250 or $250,000. Okay. If it's corruption within in a public office, whether you're appointed like a superintendent, elected like a mayor or a city council person or whatever, they will go after it. Campaign finance, same thing. You're signing those forms under penalty of perjury, and they go after that too. So it doesn't matter how much money it is. It matters about what they view as corruption.
So what do you think is going to happen in this case? I'm looking at Sheila Dixon. She ended up resigning. That was part of her plea deal. She's now satisfied everything. This is kind of the misappropriation of gift cards, people. Gift cards is what ended her career. But what do you think is going to happen in this particular case with Dallas Dance?
Well, it's interesting that it's gotten to this point because I know, or I think that his attorneys would have been speaking to them prior to this indictment. Usually you're trying to, because people knew from back in summer last year, early summer, that he was under investigation. And so normally what happens is at some point they want to talk to you or something and you lawyer up and the lawyers try to work something out before you're indicted. And I imagine that probably happened here. But the fact that there is an indictment all these months later seems to suggest that they weren't able to work anything out and that, the state prosecutor, whatever they're offering or whatever they were offering, did not meet what he wanted. And that offer may have included some jail time. And I'm sure that he does not, obviously wish to do any jail time for this. And so now he's indicted. Yes, he's facing jail time. It's very serious. I don't know what will happen. I mean, either they'll work a deal, but any deal that he would want would not include jail time. It looks like the state prosecutor is looking for jail time. So they might go to trial on it. And I don't see how he would win a trial, though, because this is a paper case.
Right.
We talk about video Well, let's talk about paper. You know, the paper says you made this money. The paper you filed and signed under penalty of perjury, you didn't say you made the money. So what is your defense going to be?
Now, are there only certain jobs where you have to sign these kind of forms? So I'm sitting there thinking, you actually have me, Cheryl, being very nervous, trying to think about the forms that I've signed around this notion. I mean, is this attached to these type of high-profile jobs that Dallas Dance has, or really we should all be concerned about the forms? We should go back and pull them out, I think.
Well, and these are especially these financial disclosure forms are for a lot of times public officials.
Okay.
And because they want to make sure that you don't have a conflict of interest in doing your job for the public as a public servant, that no money that's coming into your household, or for Congress people, stocks that you own, for example.
Okay.
For Supreme Court justices, what they're involved in, they want to know what types of things are benefiting you, what companies are benefiting you, what people are benefiting you, so that they can see whether there's a conflict of interest. Maybe they're not saying you can't do it, but they're saying disclose it. If there's a conflict later on, you may have to recuse yourself from certain things. Doesn't mean you can't do your job, but it gives a way of checking for conflicts of interest, and that's the reason most public officials have forms like these.
You need to be clear, folks. This is what you need to do to protect yourself so you don't end up in this situation. We have Gene on the phone. He has a question for you, Cheryl. Gene, welcome to the show.
Hey, okay. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Okay. My question was, and I just heard you say that, it's to disclose that you made extra money. You just have to disclose it. Is that what you're saying?
I did say that, but there are also circumstances where you may not be permitted to make, this extra money. There may be a circumstance where you're...
So that's the gray area. So if you don't disclose it, it's almost like you're sort of suspicious. They're suspicious of you, and you might be guilty of something. So it's better to disclose it. And my point is that everybody basically can do it, but they just have to disclose it. And the thing that comes to my mind is Adam Clayton Powell and the situation he found himself in. So is it similar to Powell, meaning that other people do it, but I don't know if he didn't disclose his, but they just singled him out for doing basically, as he said, what he was doing, what everybody else was doing.
Right.
And so that's where I was confused. I just didn't know that everybody can do it, but just make sure that you put it on your form.
Okay, thank you so much, Gene. Let me have you answer that. So he's saying, is that what you're saying? You're saying that you can go ahead and you can make this money, but you need to disclose it. Is that exactly what you're saying?
No,
okay.
I can't say across the board that you can go and make the money, but I'm saying that there may be circumstances in your particular position where you can't consult with outside entities, or you can't do that. In fact, when Dallas Dance, I believe, when he first had the issues with the school board, I think it's the current superintendent who has said that she just won't do it. She's not any longer, anyway. She won't any longer consult with outside companies and get paid for it.
Yeah.
So she has made, the acting superintendent, Verlita White, has made that statement. But it doesn't mean, I can't answer whether you can do it. That depends on your position. And you always check with your ethics officer if you're not sure. But you must disclose it, I can say that. You have to disclose it, no matter what it is. And because, if he had not disclosed just one time, or missed one thing, it would be different. But when I was reading his indictment, there's a whole list of places where he was working and consulting. And he was an adjunct professor at a university, and he was doing all kinds of things. And I think you were talking about the money. So even though that only added up to 147, it was at least 10 different entities, maybe around there. And so that's the problem. It no longer looks like a mistake. It no longer looks like an oversight. It looks like you just weren't reporting it.
Okay, so this is a lot, folks. We have a lot to unpack here. Cheryl, I'm going to ask if you could stay on over the break for just a moment, because we do have Clarence on hold with the call. Can you stay with us for another moment, Cheryl?
Sure.
Okay, this is Today with Dr. Kaye. I'm Dr. Kaye Whitehead. You can give us a call as well, 410-319-8888. When we come back, we're going to get some more answers to these questions. 8888. Before we went to break, we were talking with Cheryl Wood, former federal prosecutor and legal analyst. Thank you for staying with us, Cheryl.
Absolutely, Dr. Kaye.
And Clarence had given us a quick call. We wanted to get Clarence's question in before we switch topics. Clarence, welcome back to the show.
Hey, good afternoon, ladies, and Ms. Woods. Ms. Woods, you know, the only way I can answer this question is how does the state get away with it? Mm-hmm. You described a special prosecutor that has the authority to go after people for omissions or even outright lying on applications, and he can prosecute them. Now, that's his job, you know, but the state has no agency to go after police officers with that specific task that when they commit crimes in office. And you mentioned that these were mayors, people who are appointees or in political offices. Well, by the same token, a police officer should be considered not as an employee, but an appointee to uphold the laws of the state. So therefore, it should be a special prosecutor in place as the one that you just described. How does the state get away with it? What language is there or what structure, you know, removes that off of the table, so to speak? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Clarence. So Cheryl, what do you think? You know, why don't we have someone in place? Or maybe we do. You can enlighten us.
No, we don't. And I think Clarence makes an excellent point. I mean, the police are also public servants, much like the individuals I described, that this state prosecutor goes after. The difference, I think, between the cases would be a lot of the state prosecutors' cases are based on paper, like I was saying earlier. They're paper cases. So it's easier for them to make a case against someone when they have it on paper, right? So, but the cases against the police, it is interesting. The police are treated very differently in our society than everyone else. I remember being in London, and they wanted to they would charge police with a hate crime for shooting someone. We don't do that here in the United States. We don't charge police with hate crimes generally. And if we do, please somebody bring it to my attention. Right. So we treat police very differently, as I described earlier. And I think, you know, that's an excellent idea. I think I want to say the feds, but you know, the federal government they very rarely bring cases, but when they do, a lot of times they have success, and that's probably why they rarely bring them, because they don't bring the ones they don't think they can win. This case right now against the Gun Trace Task Force, they've got a former detective on the stand now. So when you have actual police saying things against police, right, you know, that's always very helpful instead of covering up for each other. And it looks like this case, you know, there may be a good case. I haven't watched it myself, but in reading about it, looks like there may be a good case from the feds. And actually, there's an allegation there that the state's attorney's office, someone from the state's attorney's office in Baltimore, tipped off these police officers about them being investigated. So, you know, I think, Clarence, it's a good idea. And how do they get away with it? I think the citizens have to demand it. And I think Governor Hogan now wants to demand some sort of entity to look at school corruption.
Right.
After this, well, you know, what about people being murdered? So I would think that's something. We already have somebody look at school corruption. I mean, the state prosecutor's doing that, right?
So let's deal with people being murdered.
Right. Yeah.
Cheryl Wood, thank you so much for joining us. She's a federal former prosecutor and legal analyst. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Thank you, Dr. Kaye.
So we turn our attention now to exactly what Cheryl was talking about, what has been happening in the schools, the funding for the schools, an update on the school board meeting from a different perspective. We have heard from the parents who were there. We have talked about some of the testimonies from the parents. We're now going to hear from Frank Pantanella. He's a senior education advocate for the Education Reform Project for the ACLU of Maryland. How are you, Mr. Pantanella?
Hello, great. Thanks for having me.
I'm happy to have you on the show. So I want to start by talking about education, finance, and funding. And I want to begin by playing a clip from the CEO, Dr. Sonia Santelises, about what is happening with the system. Why don't we take a listen to it, and then we can talk about it. So that clip should be ready in just a second. So you know what, Frank, while they're pulling that clip.
What is our plan to not send money back?
So it's a great question, and thank you for asking it. So we did not send money back.
the article in the Sun was incorrect. So the $66 million that it was referring to was analysis that we did about the way that the state funds us that was inappropriately funding us and penalizing us for basically not having resources. So when we get state dollars, we were being partially funded by the state, which means that instead, if we asked for $1 million to fix the boiler, they weren't giving us $1 million in 1 year. They were giving it to us over 2 or 3 years.
So that was Dr. Sonia Santalese kind of talking about this article that came out in the Baltimore Sun about how the Baltimore Sun's report that money was spent back was wrong. Now, Frank, we had Luke Broadwater on the show. Luke is the one who wrote the article for the Baltimore Sun. He said it was absolutely correct. So we have the Baltimore Sun on one end saying that the city sent back money. We have Dr. Santalese on the other end saying that the report was incorrect. How can we make sense of this? What exactly is going on with the money?
Yeah, I think they're both correct, and I think the public needs to hear the nuanced kind of conversation around this. It was Allison Perkins Cohen who was describing that process and what happened. Really, what she was talking about and what Luke reported on was the state process for approving and appropriating money for school construction for all districts in Maryland. And what they've been doing recently is they've been giving partial funding for requested projects for the city school system. So this could be large HVAC projects, replacements of roof, things like that. It takes maybe 2 to 3 years for the city school system to get enough money to do the project, and by that time, usually costs have gone up significantly. And so the amount that was estimated before and what they were approved for can't be spent. They have to rescind that money to a contingency account that they can access again. So the city school system has rescinded projects. That money has gone back to what they call the statewide contingency account. It's still Baltimore City money. They just have to reapply for it, and it's a real tedious, bureaucratic process for getting that money, and it really delays the projects. When heating systems and roofs that are leaking need to be fixed immediately, the process just doesn't work for them. So just to be clear, the city did not lose this money. They've reapplied for it. Right now, there is $0 in the contingency account. So they have spent the money that was appropriated to them. But it's fair to say that those projects were delayed because of the partial funding system. And it's also fair to say that the state has heard the complaints from the city school system as well as some advocates such as the ACLU, and that process should be fixed. And I also want to say that this partial funding issue is just a tiny little issue within the whole bigger context of the poor condition of school facilities. Baltimore City Schools might get somewhere around $30 million a year from the state, and right now there's about $3 billion needed in deferred maintenance. So this is all the structural issues, the mechanical systems. They're way beyond their life cycle costs. They need to be replaced. Most of the schools are in very poor condition. $1 billion of that $3 billion is for heating and air conditioned systems alone. That includes replacing old pipes that burst in the walls that, you really can't see, but they're old and outdated, and they're gonna, it's a ticking time bomb. These buildings are just too old, and they have not been funded properly over the past decades.
Now, Frank, one of the things that people were saying, and these are parents who are so frustrated with the city, and not just with the infrastructure, but also with what some parents are saying, the lack of academic preparedness that their children need to have, whether it's the man whose 12th grade son is graduating with a 5th grade math level, or the woman whose son is at Calverton and doesn't even have a composite score to get into Edmondson. Can parents potentially sue the system? Because that was something that was coming up at the meeting. We need to think about filing a case against the system. What would that look like, and can that actually happen?
Well, I'm actually not a lawyer. I do work for the ACLU, but I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not prepared to speak about any kind of potential litigation on those issues. But I think it was very important for the parents to go to the town hall, and I think that more town halls are needed to make sure that parents' voices are heard. And, if things aren't being handled at the school level through the normal process, then this is what happens, right? So I think these answers need to be these questions need to be answered, and if there are big systemic issues that are related to these types of complaints, then certainly the school district must be held accountable.
So can you explain to us then, because this idea of I'm going to get the answer for these parents around suing, because it keeps being sent to me, so we'll definitely make sure we get that answer, folks. Around the funding formula and the policy that's on the operating side for the classrooms. I know that in Maryland, the argument has always been made that Baltimore spends more money per child than any other system, but at the school board meeting, Dr. Santelises she was arguing that even though we may spend more money on paper, in actual practice, our school system and the infrastructure and the buildings are in such a state of disrepair that it's really not the same money when you compare it.
Well, let me just state for the listeners that there are two sides of the budget for the school system. The operating side pays for basically everything from teacher salaries to utility bills, materials, and things like that. The capital budget pays for infrastructure, so renovations and system replacements, new construction. So I just wanted to separate those two things. And both sides of the budget are grossly underfunded. I understand that there's a lot of anger and there are complaints from parents, but I'm wondering how many of those problems would be solved if the state actually provided adequate funding and if they actually fulfilled their obligation to provide an adequate education as guaranteed by the state constitution. Back in the 90s, the ACLU, before I was there, filed a lawsuit against the state contending that the state was grossly underfunding city schools, and they were in violation of their unconstitutional mandate. Of course, the state pushed back and said, no, it was mismanagement. Same kind of arguments that are happening today. It's mismanagement. We go to court. We represented Baltimore City families, and after several visits, in 2000, Judge Kaplan ruled in our favor and found that the state was indeed not funding Baltimore City schools adequately. So that's when the Thornton Commission was established by the state, and they came up with a recommendation, most of which was adopted into law, the Bridge to Excellence Act of 2002. That's the current state education funding formula. So there was an increase of about $300 million to the school system from 2002 to 2008. And in 2008, there was a recession, right? At that time, the legislature cut what's called the inflation factor of the education funding formula. And what that does is it's a multiplier. So as costs go up, right, as inflation happens every year, as costs go up, the cost of transportation, healthcare, utilities, energy, food, everything goes up. And that multiplier is supposed to help the per pupil keep up with the rising costs of doing business. When they cut that to zero, there was flat growth in per pupil while costs went up significantly. And this has been happening over the past almost decade. So based on the state's own definition of what adequate funding is, Baltimore City is $290 million short. And that was reported to the new commission on funding for education, the Kirwan Commission. So $290 million short. The state also paid for a new consultant to look at education funding, and this was mandated by the Thornton Law. 10 years later, they were supposed to reevaluate it for educational adequacy, and they found that Baltimore City Schools should be getting $358 million from all this money should be from the state as well, according to their analysis. So it's really hard for me to say, the school system should be sued or holding city schools completely accountable when the state itself has not been completely fulfilling its constitutional obligation to provide the adequate funding so that city schools can develop that or deliver that great education. So, I think, I think we really have to look at this comprehensively. Yes,
Right.
the school system needs to do what they're supposed to do, and parents have every right to demand it. At the same time, the state needs to fulfill their constitutional obligation as well.
And I think we can understand, or at least I can understand, the pain and the frustration from the parents. Like I get
Absolutely.
what they're coming from and where they're coming from. I get that when they hear these numbers, I mean, it sounds like blame is being passed around. The state's not doing their job. The city's not doing their job. It's the school board. No, it's actually the teachers. Like it just becomes this blame game that's taking place. But in the center of this, children are missing opportunities that they need. They're in these kind of inhumane conditions, and they're being moved along. It's not like we're going to wait 10 years and these same kids are going to be back again, right? So,
Right.
so we're
Right,
missing this. So as an education advocate, what are some of the things that you do to step in and help parents? I'm assuming you work on behalf of the parents in these type of situations.
Well, whenever I get a call about something that's going on at the school level, I try to get all the information possible, and I try to find out if the system is working as it's supposed to. If they're getting their questions answered, and if they're not, I start advocating for them and trying to get the answers for them, and trying to connect them with the right people at North Avenue so that they can get their questions answered. But I think that, I think there needs to be a comprehensive list of things that need to happen. And like you said, everyone's pointing fingers at each other, and everyone really needs to stop doing that and say everyone has a responsibility here. This is what the school system's responsibility is, and these are some of the big things that need to change. And at the state level, the same thing. So
now when you work with parents and trying to help them to get their own, I guess, to build up their own muscle around advocacy. Because I think that it's one thing to go out and get someone to advocate for you, but there's also something about being able to advocate for yourself. What are, 2 or 3 tips that you would give parents of how to advocate for themselves in this type of situation with the school system?
Well, it's important to gather all the information, and document everything. So all the conversations that they have, how they reported, who they reported to, what the response was, how long it took to get that response, and so on. We really focus on advocacy at the state level. Back in 2008, when the state cut the inflation factor of the education funding formula that led to this big $290 million budget shortfall, that cut just happened, and there wasn't an organized Baltimore response. So the next year, the recession was still happening. There were more cuts proposed, and that's when my group, the ACLU, and several other groups got together and said, we really need to do something big in Annapolis and make sure that we don't get cut this year. We formed the Baltimore Education Coalition, and that's been together since 2009. And our main issue has been really pushing back cuts at the state level. And I'd say altogether we've probably close to between 200 and 300 million we've saved in cuts or losses at the state level.
Now I want to.
One more. I didn't answer your question. We do bring parents down, and we try to help them understand, how education is funded. What part of the formula has been cut, what part of the formula needs to be restored, and we go and we talk directly with legislators that represent the city, and also legislators that hold a position within the legislature, so the chairs of the Budget and Tax Committee and the House Appropriations Committee, and other state leaders. And we do big actions where we invite the media down, and we have rallies and bring thousands of people down if necessary. So.
Now, folks, if you have a question for Frank Pantanella, about education advocacy and what's happening in Baltimore City and how you can begin to advocate for your child, give us a call at 410-319-8888. So, Frank, we have come through a very difficult season here in Baltimore City where those pictures of our young people in the schools, it went viral. Dr. Santalisa said it's now an international topic that people are discussing about what's happening in Baltimore City. So what do you think should happen? Like, where do we go from here?
On the facilities side, I think there are three major things that need to happen. Number one is that we need some kind of an emergency fund for the city school system. I mean, like I said, these buildings are way past their life cycle. They're going to have emergencies arise. There's no really avoiding that. So some kind of emergency fund, and I'm not exactly sure how much should be in it annually. I think that's a conversation between the school system and those people in Annapolis that can set up this fund. But that needs to happen in state legislation this year. Number two is the normal process for or system for funding school construction and renovations is through the state capital program and through the city's capital program. We can expect to see somewhere around $30 million from the state and $17 million from the city, which is not even $50 million for a $3 billion need. So that needs to be reformed. There needs to be more funding in that pot for all the schools in Maryland, but they really also need to do a better job with equity. The state gives relatively equal amounts of money to all the large school districts. So we basically get just like the same amount of money as Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, and Prince George's County. Yet we have by far the greatest amount of deficiencies we have the poorest conditions in our buildings. So there's no real equity lens applied to the way they distribute funding. So we think the state needs to assess all the buildings. They don't have this kind of data that they collect from school districts. So some way that they can go out, assess the buildings, and know the conditions in the building, and then prioritize the buildings in the worst condition and make sure that those districts with the worst buildings and that have the least capacity get more state funding than the ones that are wealthy. And then the city, they need to look at how much they can issue in bonds a year and make sure that they give more to the city school system. I don't know how much that should be, but right now it's $17 million. The mayor indicated she wanted to increase that to $19 million, but we think that needs to be higher, and they need to make every effort to make that higher. And thirdly, the third big thing is the 21st Century School Program, which is rebuilding schools in Baltimore and fully renovating schools in Baltimore. About 23 to 28 will be completed with this first $1 billion that we secured back in 2013. Since the buildings, the other 100 buildings that aren't in the program are dependent on that little bit amount of money in the capital programs. So they really need to be funded for full renovation or completely built new.
Thank you so much, Frank Pantanella. Yep. He's a senior education advocate for the Education Reform Project for the ACLU of Maryland. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So,
appreciate
folks, we're going to leave it right here for today. I want to note that when we started this show, we were talking about what took place in Lansing, Michigan, about the 156 women who came forward to stand in their power and speak their truth about how they were assaulted by Dr. Larry Nassar. He was the USA Olympic gymnast doctor and a physician at Michigan State University. We want to give the number out again for the National Sexual Assault Hotline, 1-800-656 HOPE, 1-800-656-HOPE. Folks, if this story triggered anything in you, if it's something that's happening to you now or has happened to you, you are not alone. We urge you to give the National Sexual Assault Hotline a call to have people to support you. 1-800-656-HOPE. Today with Dr. Kaye is a production of WEAA. The show is produced by Iorio Digizuwa. Our board operators are Andre Melton and Mikhail Ramos. Stay tuned because up next is For the Culture with Faraji. Remember that here on Today with Dr. Kaye, your voice matters. Your opinion matters. We tell stories that matter. We are here for you and we are listening because if it has your ear, then it has our attention. Right here on Public Radio, WEAA 88.9 FM, the voice of the community. Make an appointment. Meet us back here tomorrow at 3 p.m. Let's talk again. Stay tuned for a final look at MTA.
Good afternoon from the MTA. Out there on the MARC train system commute, you'll find Camden Train 850 with a 8 to 10 minute delay and Train 855 on the Camden line running about 15 minutes late. Metro subway link with a 5 to 10 minute delay. Light rail link looks good for travel. No delays or issues there. And if your ride is on the buses, you'll find the number 62 northbound diverted at Avondale and William Wade. That's for a water main break repair. The 62 southbound at Dundalk and Maine, and the Navy line westbound at Salters Point and Avon Beach, and eastbound at Maine and Avon Beach, again for a water main break repair. The Green and 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 main break repair. The Green and